The room smelled of wealth and something burning beneath it, like the faint scorch of a secret held too close to a flame. 100 tiny prisms trembled in the chandelier above the Caldwell dining table, shaking light across gold-rimmed china as if even the crystals knew what was coming. Aria Bennett sat nearly motionless at the center of it all, a soft focused stillness in a room that vibrated with calculation. Across from her sat Damien Caldwell, her husband, composed and bright-eyed, the kind of handsome that makes you forget to breathe until you remember why you should. To his right, Eleanor Caldwell toyed with a diamond bracelet. To his left, Charles Caldwell pressed a fountain pen between blunt fingers, poised like a gavel. Between them, a thick leather folder that did not belong with dessert. If you're watching this unfold, don't blink. You'll want to catch the precise moment when love and loyalty peel back like old wallpaper. And hey, pause for a second. If dark, twisty marriage stories are your thing, tap subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling where you're watching from, because the move Aria makes tonight will have you clapping and whispering, finally. The quartet in the next room drew its bow across a lingering note. Roasted duck cooled, its lacquered skin dimming under the lights. Somewhere beyond the French doors, rain tapped the reflecting pool with polite persistence. The sound steadied Aria. She had always liked rain. It was honest about falling. Shall we get to it? Eleanor asked, voice sugared and steady, the way a nurse might talk to a patient who doesn't know the needle is already in. She slid the folder forward with 2 elegant fingers. The leather sighed as it stopped in front of Aria's plate. Damien's smile broadened, too charming by half. It's nothing complicated, he said, aiming the words across the table as if they might burrow into Aria and soften her. Just a simple agreement. So we're aligned. You know my parents. Legacy, stewardship, family. On another night, Aria would have met that smile and given him the benefit of the doubt she kept in her purse like a spare key. Not tonight. She let the folder sit untouched, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from betraying the drum under her ribs. She had never been a nervous woman, she was a measured woman. But there is a difference between measuring a deal and measuring your marriage. Charles leaned, the pen still between his fingers. Our council has revised the language, he said. His consonants were carved. Cleaner. A single trust, pooled resources. One entity. One family. He tapped the folder once. The pen left a dot on the leather, a small bruise. Aria tilted her head. Whose pen signs the checks in that family? She asked, as if she were working out a crossword clue. Don't be reductive, Eleanor murmured, smiling. This is to protect everyone. These days, money slips. This keeps it from slipping away. Damien's voice warmed. Babe, it's just a formality. I mean, you trust me. He said trust the way people say water to someone who is thirsty. There are words that are doors, trust is one of them. It swings on memories only the two of you know. Aria reached for her glass. The Bordeaux was excellent, blackberry and something like smoke, but she tasted only the discipline of letting it settle on her tongue before she put it down. She did not look at the folder. She looked at Damien instead, and noticed the faintest tell at the corner of his mouth, the smile just a fraction too still. A mask held in place by a trembling hand. Of course, she said lightly, as if trust were a bird that lived on her shoulder. Which is why you won't mind what I've prepared. A new silence entered the room, not the awkward kind but the explosive kind, like a match struck and held just shy of tinder. Eleanor's bracelet clicked. The diamonds caught 3 points of light and threw them around like knives. Prepared? She asked, feigning curiosity. The butler materialized in the archway the way old houses produce ghosts. Ms. Bennet, he said, tipping his head with that unbothered grace only battle-tested staff can achieve, your counsel has arrived. Damien's smile thinned. Charles's pen went still. A line appeared between Eleanor's brows, an almost pretty crack in porcelain. Aria didn't rise yet. She had learned the value of stillness in rooms like this, negotiations, closings, the little wars everyone insists are cordial. "I asked Marcus to drop by," she said. "I thought, since we're discussing my earnings, my portfolio, my properties, someone ought to read the part about what happens to my name." Eleanor's laughter came too quickly, beads broken from a string. "Darling, this is family." "That's the part I'm reading," Arya said. Marcus Hale stepped through the doorway as if arriving at a stage he owned. He was not dramatic, he was immovable. Slate suit, rain still freckling his shoulders, eyes taking the room in with one practiced sweep. He set a slim briefcase on the sideboard, opened it with a neat click, and pulled a compact stack of papers secured with a translucent binder clip. "Good evening," he said. "Pleasure." He did not elaborate on for whom the pleasure was intended. Charles drew himself up. "We're not in the habit of involving third parties in private family discussions." "Then it's an exceptional evening for everyone," Marcus replied, unbending the clip and taking his time about it. His voice never rose, but some rooms are trained to hear authority and this room was one of them. "May I?" He set the Caldwell's folder beside his stack and lifted the first page free. He read quietly. The quartet in the next room moved through a movement of something baroque, ornate, precise, mercilessly balanced. Pages turned under Marcus's hands with a faint, expensive whisper. On the third page his mouth made a shape that was not quite a smile. "Interesting," he said. "You've called it a trust." "That is the legal instrument," Charles returned. Marcus turned the page. "And yet you've named the three of you as settlers and trustees, with full withdrawal rights, while Ms. Bennett's contributions are mandatory and her access to the corpus is subject to consent by a majority of trustees." He flipped again, gentle as a surgeon. "You've also granted yourselves power to sell, convey, mortgage, and otherwise encumber any asset transferred into the vehicle without her countersignature. That is, creative." Eleanor's diamonds didn't sparkle so much as glare. "Language can be adjusted." Marcus looked up at Arya as if the two of them were alone. "Language is never the problem," he said. "Intent is." Damien shifted in his chair. "Marcus, this is really." "Between family," Marcus finished for him, not unkindly. "Yes. That line gets a lot of airplay in rooms like this. Forgive me for being literal, Mr. Caldwell, but when a document functionally strips my client of control over everything she built before she met you, that is not a family instrument. It's a siphon." The word landed with a dull, satisfying weight. Siphon. Arya watched it register in the air between them like a slow thunder. Eleanor mastered her face by degrees. "Your tone is uncivil," she said, "which is what people say when the facts are worse than the manner of delivery." "My tone is dry," Marcus returned. "It gets that way when the facts are wet." A muscle ticked in Charles's jaw. "You have a great deal of nerve arriving uninvited to dictate the structure of our estate planning." "On the contrary," Marcus said, tapping a fingertip against the signature page, "I've arrived to dictate only one thing: Ms. Bennett will not be signing this." Damien inhaled through his nose. The charming man who had told Arya at midnight that roofs didn't leak, marriages did, "We'll fix it, babe, it's us," seemed to slip a fraction out of frame, replaced by someone who measured power in inches and was suddenly short. "Arya," he said gently, then sternly, then gently again, trying on voices until one fit. "Can we step into the foyer and talk like adults?" "We are talking like adults," Arya said. "This is the part where I listen, ask questions, and decline." The quartet paused. A beat of silence opened like a trapdoor. Rain pressed a little harder at the glass. "Decline?" Charles repeated, as if the syllables were a novelty. "Yes," Arya said, and smiled, small, real. The kind of smile that says I did not come here to be devoured. Eleanor leaned forward, elbows on the table, etiquette bleeding out under the strain. "You don't understand what you're inviting," she said softly. "This family protects what is ours. We don't lose. I'm not yours, Arya said, and watched the sentence hit Eleanor the way cold water hits a flame, steam first, then nothing. It should have ended there, with paper, with refusal, with the quiet collapse of an ugly idea. But families like the Caldwells don't hear no as a stop sign. They hear it as a dare. Damien reached across the table and took Arya's wrist. Not hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to say I am accustomed to getting what I hold. His thumb pressed a pulse he did not own. Don't do this, he said, voice low. The charm was gone, the shape beneath it was not pretty. You really don't want to make enemies in this family. Arya regarded his hand, clean nails, cufflink winking, tendons like ropes under the skin, and then she looked at him. That, she said, appears to be the offer you brought me. She slid her wrist free, and the tiny surrender of his fingers felt like the first creak in a failing beam. Marcus had not moved, but his attention sharpened until it felt like a point on the far side of the table. We're finished here, he said, to no one and everyone. He closed the folder that wasn't theirs, replaced it where Charles's pen had bruised the leather, and snapped his briefcase shut. Eleanor's laugh cracked. You will not walk into my home, Anne. You invited me, Arya said, rising. You set the table. You poured the wine. You slid the paper. I brought a reader. That's the only difference between tonight and the last 3 dinners, Eleanor. Tonight I read. She felt the weight of the room attempt to cling to her, the chandelier, the portraits with eyes that followed money, the rug so thick you could lose a coin and never hear it land. She had felt those weights before, in closing rooms where men smiled kindly and prized her backbone, in offices where executives called her dear and hoped she would leave a digit off a number. Every weight that had tried to lay claim to her had trained her for this one. She breathed, slow, and let the clinging fall away. Charles stood too, which made the chairs scrape and the table jump. If you walk out now, he said, you walk out against us. Arya pushed her chair in with 2 fingers. I came in against you, she said. I just hadn't said it out loud. Damien made a strangled sound, half plea, half curse. For a second, something flickered across his face that looked like the boy he might have been before this house taught him to mistake possession for love. It died quickly, smothered by the lesson. You're burning it down, he said. You don't even know what you're burning. Arya considered that. If it turns to ash when I say no, it wasn't a home, she said. It was a kindling pile. The butler was already at the doorway, as if he had foreseen the exit the minute the folder appeared. Good staff can smell endings. Arya walked toward him with Marcus a half step behind, the 2 of them leaving a path through the heat of the room like a cool front. Miss Bennet, the butler murmured as she passed. There was respect in it, and a note of pity not for her. They crossed the foyer, where the air was better and the light kinder. The rain was louder here, honest against the stone. Marcus didn't speak until they reached the door. You did well, he said. I did prepared, she answered. He nodded once, a verdict. Prepared is the only kind of well that wins against people like that. The driver pulled the car forward. Arya slid into the back seat, the leather cool, the city's lights smudging themselves down the wet windshield in streaks of gold and red. For a single, unwelcome second, her throat tightened. Not from fear. From grief for a story she had once told herself at 3 in the morning when Damien lay asleep beside her and she believed his breathing meant we. Most grief is not for people. It is for versions of ourselves that were briefly possible. By the time the gates sighed open and the car moved onto the road, the tightness had loosened. Arya took out her phone. One missed call from a number she knew and had already decided not to answer. One message from Marcus that had arrived while she was still at the table, 3 bullet points, a time, an address. A safety net woven from forethought and signatures. Tomorrow, she said. We start filing. Dawn, Marcus replied. Bank first. Then county. Then state. Then the folks who carry badges. Arya set the phone face down and watched the city run past. She thought of the folder, of the pen, of the way Eleanor's smile had cracked when the word prepared entered the room. She thought of rain and roofs and the certainty of gravity. Most traps only work if the prey keeps looking at the bait. Tonight, she had watched the snare instead. At a red light, the driver glanced at her in the mirror. "You all right, ma'am?" She considered the question, then let the answer arrive without apology. "I am," she said. "And I will be." The light changed. The car eased forward. Somewhere behind them a quartet packed away their bows, and a house reset its table for breakfast, and 3 people rehearsed a story they wished would hold. Ahead of her, Arya saw only straight lines, the clean edge of a courthouse step, the sharp corner of a bank counter, the neat box where a signature goes when it belongs to her and only her. She folded her hands in her lap the way she had at the table, as if to remind herself that stillness can be a weapon too. When the car turned left, slick tires catching and holding, she let her eyes close for the first time all night. Sleep didn't come. Resolve did. Behind them, the mansion's lights blazed as if to insist that nothing had changed. But at the center of that too-bright room, under that too-bright chandelier, the folder sat waiting for a hand that would never come back. And in a safe deposit box 3 miles away, keyed, logged, notarized, sat the proof that tonight had not been a gamble. It had been an execution of plan. The rain kept falling, steady, cleansing, unafraid to be seen. 6 years earlier, Arya Bennett didn't believe in whirlwind anything. She believed in plans that fit on a single page, numbers that reconciled at the bottom line, and coffee at 5:30 a.m. before job sites woke up. She wore steel-toe boots as comfortably as heels, knew every contractor on a first-name basis, and could walk a half-finished kitchen and price the backsplash within $10. If love was going to arrive, it would have to respect the calendar and leave her spreadsheets alone. They met on a night she'd planned to skip. A mortgage broker friend had a spare ticket to a charity gala downtown, an auction for arts education with too much glassware and not enough food. Arya went because the friend once pulled strings to rush a closing, and debts like that mattered to her. She wore a black dress that didn't ask anyone's permission and put her hair up because drywall dust had trained her to keep it out of her eyes. Damien Caldwell noticed her before she noticed him. Later, she'd realize his gift wasn't beauty, though he had plenty of that, it was attention. He watched the room the way a dealer watches a table, calm, calculating, amused by patterns most people miss. When their friend waved Arya over, Damien was already turning toward her, a glass of bourbon in hand, tie loosened just enough to say he hated rules while obeying all the ones that paid. "You must be the analyst who talks like a contractor," he said, smiling like it was an inside joke they had earned together. "And you must be the donor who prefers bourbon to speeches," she answered. He laughed. It was a good laugh, unforced. Guilty. They stood too long at the bar for the event planner's liking, and when a waiter arrived with skewers barely pretending to be dinner, Damien waved them away and asked Arya if she'd ever seen the private library on the 20th floor. She said no. He said that was unacceptable. 10 minutes later they were walking a quiet hallway lined in dark wood and old photographs, and he was asking questions that didn't feel like tests. "What's your favorite part of a flip?" he asked. "The moment the front door shuts for the last time," she said. "When the house stops belonging to me." "You like letting go?" "I like finishing," she said. "It's not the same thing." He nodded like she'd passed something. When the gala ended, he walked her to her car, put his hands in his pockets, and said, "Dinner. Tomorrow. I'll pick a place with real food." She surprised herself and said yes without asking where. Dinner was a room with velvet banquettes and walls the color of midnight. The server knew his name. He ordered a wine Arya could not pronounce and immediately pivoted to her work again, zoning changes on the south side, a new transit stop that would nudge one of her duplexes from good to gold. He didn't brag, he calibrated. When he asked what she wanted 5 years from now, she told him, fewer flips, more holds, a small team, control. He listened the way money listens, to risk and to return. By the third date, her guard had a door in it. By the sixth, the door had a key. He could be playful without being careless, generous without keeping score. He showed up at an open house and quietly refilled the ice bucket without telling her. He sent a link to a city council land use meeting and highlighted the timestamp where a single sentence could affect her loan-to-value calculations. He lent her a book about historic preservation and then didn't ask if she'd read it. When she did, he knew which chapter had made her mark the margin. People like that are dangerous because they look like care. The Caldwell estate arrived in her life like a postcard from a country with rules she didn't yet speak. The gate ironwork was old enough to tell you what time the sun hit it best. Inside, portraits watched with calm entitlement. The house smelled like polished things and roses cut by someone who knew where to find exactly 12 perfect stems in February. Eleanor Caldwell opened the door in a silk blouse the color of cream, pearls sitting perfectly at her throat, smile soft as a benediction. "Aria," she said, and made Aria's name sound like a small, lovely mistake. "We've heard so much." Charles Caldwell's handshake was exact and brief. He had a banker's face, the kind that had calculated enough losses to fear nothing but surprise. He offered a compliment that wasn't one, "Damien says you have a good head for numbers," and a seat that wasn't optional. At dinner, Eleanor asked about Aria's properties with the guiltless curiosity of a person who had never had to ask permission to own something. "Real estate is so mercurial," she said, spooning soup with perfect posture. "I imagine it's a relief to marry into stability." Aria smiled, because warmth requires water. She wasn't there to fight fire with fire. "I've done all right standing on my own 2 feet, she said. "Of course," Eleanor said, already finished with the subject. "And you will continue to. Families like ours only add." Charles sipped his wine. "We protect," he said. "It's the most important thing we do." On the drive back to the city, Damien squeezed Aria's hand. "They liked you," he said. His voice was boyish in a way she hadn't heard before. It mattered to him. That mattered to her. The first red flag arrived wearing a polite outfit. Damien texted at lunch on a Tuesday, "Card issue. Can I Venmo you later for the caterer? They need the deposit now." She sent it. He paid her back 3 days later, with interest and a knowing grin that said he understood the optics. It was easy to file under harmless. The second came wrapped as a joke. "You know, if 32nd Street goes under your LLC instead of personal, you'll save a point on insurance," he said, tapping her screen as she scrolled. "Or we could put it under the family trust and do even better." "We," she said, light but firm. He raised his hands. Figure of speech. He began introducing Aria to people who said they were in family offices, a phrase she knew and disliked. They used words like vehicle and sleeve and exposure in ways that made her think of cardiac surgery performed while the patient was trying to walk a dog. Their smiles were almost kind. The math beneath the smiles asked for access. When Damien proposed, it was on her rooftop. The city spread like a printed circuit board below them, lights resolving to patterns she'd memorized running comps at midnight. He didn't kneel, he stood before her like a partner and held out a ring in a simple gold setting, nothing that would snag on a glove or show badly in a basement with poor lighting. "Marry me," he said, not a question exactly, but said in a voice she wanted to answer. She said yes because she meant it. There are moments when life's arithmetic becomes unaccountable. Aria had learned to respect those too. Their wedding was small by Caldwell standards and elegant by hers, an outdoor ceremony behind a library with brick that had seen a century of rain, 25 guests, a quartet playing something that didn't try too hard. Eleanor wore silver and managed not to look disappointed by restraint. Charles smiled in photographs with a mouth that hadn't practiced it lately. Damien held Aria's hands and promised ordinary things, coffee, patience, equity in decisions. Arya promised to tell the truth when the truth was ugly. They both meant it while they were saying it. The first year softened them. They bought a narrow townhouse on a quiet block with a lilac bush that sang every spring. They fought about nothing, whether the knives should be stored blade down or blade up. Whether a chair could count as a good chair if it looked better than it felt. He learned that Arya slept face down when tired. She learned he needed white noise to drown out his own thoughts. He brought home flowers sometimes, not roses but tulips wrapped in paper from the stand on the corner, petals creased like good origami. When deals went sideways for her, he cooked. When his firm made a bad quarter, she sent him links to walks they could take that ended at a bakery. The second year asked more. Damien began to borrow again, small sums with bigger reasons. Bonus is delayed. Wire got stuck. Can you float this and I'll square it Friday? Friday became Monday. Monday became, the bank messed up, you know how it is. He still paid, and he still brought tulips, and he still laughed at himself when the key stuck in the lock. It was easy to believe this was adulthood rather than a pattern. Eleanor's remarks grew pointed while becoming softer. You two should consider merging calendars, she said over brunch. You're married. Efficiency is intimacy. Another time, I hope you've got your beneficiary designations aligned. It's tragic how many couples forget. She said tragic like a person who had never used the word for anything but finance. Charles couched his questions like compliments. What you've built is impressive. It would be a shame if a bad market year hurt you more than necessary. Consolidation's the smartest RULO there is. Arya's best friend, Maya Ortiz, saw it and said so over noodles at a hole in the wall she preferred to any fancy room. They're trying to turn you into an asset, Maya said, pushing a water glass toward her. Assets don't get opinions. They get managed. They're old school, Arya said. And Damien's not them. Maya leveled her a look. Then why do you sound like you're trying to convince me and not yourself? Arya took the water and didn't answer. She could catalog trades she'd made with herself. She'd agreed to Sunday dinners at the estate every third week, she'd copied Damien on a few emails about her smaller projects, she'd let him recommend a tax attorney, which she tried once and did not keep. Each thing alone was nothing. That's how drift works. There were good nights too. Storms that blew in and knocked out the lights, and they ate peanut butter out of the jar and talked about the routes they took to school as kids, the smells that meant home to them, for Arya, hot iron on cotton, for Damien, chlorine from the country club pool. The intimacy of inventory. He told her about the time he'd broken a toe at 9 and no one believed him because he wasn't the kind of kid who broke. She told him about the first deal she lost because she'd believed a handshake. They tried to make a plan for children and didn't agree. He wanted to know when. She wanted to know if. He called her cautious, she called him certain. The fight ended with laughter and a long walk. The substance stayed. In the third year, Damien's requests changed shape. He didn't call them requests. Let's do a joint credit card, he said one night, chopping garlic. Simplifies points. We're hemorrhaging value doing it separate. Another morning, casually, my guy at the bank can get us a better rate on your line for Oak and 13th if we position it under our household instead of your LLC. She told him she liked her cards the way she liked her tools, labeled and separate. He shrugged and kissed her forehead and said, you and your bins, like fondness could turn a boundary into a quirk. The first time a banker called her cell and greeted her as Mrs. Caldwell, with the tone of someone who assumes alignment, she corrected him and asked why he needed her social security number, to confirm. He apologized, said it was routine, and when she pressed, said he'd call back. He didn't. She wrote the date down on a post-it, not because she was alarmed, but because she had built her life on ending guesses with facts. At a holiday dinner that winter, Eleanor slung an arm around Arya in front of a fireplace tall enough to shorten voices. We'll handle the messy money parts for you, darling, she said. It's what families like ours do. Damien has enough on his plate without worrying about your ledgers. The room laughed, and Arya matched the tone, not the content. My ledgers have never worried anyone who read them, she said. Eleanor's hand stayed right where it was. Charles began CC&G Arya on articles about optimizing family capital. He sent a book titled The Trust Advantage, underlined in pencil where the author argued that personal accounts were evidence of immaturity. Every underline felt like a finger. Damien, to his credit, sometimes pushed back against his parents in small ways, a roll of his eyes, a "Mom, enough," a deliberate change of subject. It was easy to mistake those gestures for shields. They took a weekend in Door County that spring, rented bikes with baskets and ate donuts warm enough to make their fingers shine. Arya told herself, as they coasted past apple trees, that the hard parts were the price of the good. On the drive home, Damien hummed along to a song she liked and tapped the steering wheel in rhythm. He looked young and ordinary. That image had power. She let it hold more weight than it should have. By the fourth year, the Caldwell invitations changed tone. They were less social, more ceremonial: family review, quarterly planning dinner, estate conversations. Arya skipped 2 with work as an excuse and went to the 3rd because she was tired of being the reason a fight might start. She brought brownies in a tin and watched a trust officer with cufflinks shaped like tiny locks present slides to 3 people who had invited her to their table and mistaken it for jurisdiction. "We want to align," Charles said afterward, echoing a word that had begun to itch when Arya heard it. He tapped a folder. "We'll circulate the draft." "I'll read it," Arya said, and he smiled like she'd learned a trick. In their kitchen that night, Maya called while Arya chopped parsley. "You coming to game night Friday?" "Can't," Arya said. "Estate dinner. Planning. Translation: they want your name to live where their pen can find it." Maya paused. "You okay?" "Fine," Arya said. And then, because lying to Maya never went well, she added, "I'm paying attention." "Good," Maya said. "Attention is cheaper than repair." 3 days later, a letter arrived addressed to Arya at the townhouse, the kind of letter that is thick though it contains only a single page. Across the top, pre-approval notice. In the body, "We are pleased to offer a business line of credit to Bennett Caldwell Holdings in the amount of." She read the amount twice and the entity name 3 times. She had never formed that entity. She looked at the return address, at a bank she knew by reputation, and set the letter on the counter as if it might burn through. When Damien came home, he kissed her temple and asked about her day. She slid the envelope toward him. "Did you apply for something under my name?" she asked, calm because she knew how to be calm when the beam above your head creaked. He glanced at it, too fast for a person who'd never seen it, and said, "No, must be spam. They send those all the time." He folded it once, twice, and dropped it in the recycling. "You know how they fish." She watched the paper disappear into the blue bin and decided not to fish it back out in front of him. There are moments when you choose not to argue because you want the argument to happen on paper later. That night, she lay awake and catalogued small things, the way Damien's tone softened when he said "we" and sharpened when she said "I." The way Eleanor categorized safety like an inheritance and trust like obedience, the way Charles never asked questions so much as phrased decisions in a format that sounded like questions. She told herself she was not building a case. She was building a record. Records aren't for rage. They're for clarity. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle by the time Arya's car rolled to a stop in front of her townhouse. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, casting fractured beams across the windshield. She sat in the quiet for a long moment, her hands gripping the edges of her coat, her pulse steady but her thoughts screaming. The entire dinner played in her mind like a reel she couldn't turn off. Damien's cool smile. Eleanor's syrupy voice, all warmth and venom. Charles's sharp, quiet authority. And then, that split second when her calm had pierced their script, when she'd looked them straight in the eye and told them she was prepared. That moment had been hers. But the victory was temporary. She knew that. This wasn't over. It had only begun. Inside, the townhouse felt colder than usual. She slipped off her heels, letting them fall by the door, and moved through the quiet like a ghost. The house smelled like him, cedar and bergamot. Sharp reminders that no matter how calm she'd been, her life was now sitting on the edge of something dangerous. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. You know what this means, right? His voice was low but urgent, the same tone he'd used at the dining table earlier. I do, she said. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles tightened around the phone. They won't stop, Marcus said. They've been circling this for months, maybe longer. Damien, he's deeper in this than you think. That contract was desperation wearing a silk mask. Aria's chest tightened. How deep? We'll find out, Marcus promised. But I'd bet my license they're drowning. Debt deep enough to pull anyone under. Aria swallowed hard. Then we don't wait. We start tomorrow. By mid-morning, she was in Marcus's office. The space smelled of leather and rain, sharp and professional. A second man sat in one of the chairs across from Marcus, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, his presence quiet but commanding. Aria, this is Julian Cross, Marcus said, standing. Private investigator. He's the best in the city. Discreet. Efficient. If there's something to be found, he'll find it. Julian's handshake was firm, his gaze unwavering. You want the truth, he said, more statement than question. I want everything, Aria said, sliding a folder across the desk. Accounts, transfers, properties. If he's touched anything in my name, I want to know. If there are debts, if there are people, I want that too. Julian opened the folder briefly, scanned a few pages, and then closed it with a quiet click. 72 hours, he said. You'll have a preliminary report. Full details by the end of the week. Make sure it's airtight, Marcus added. Julian's mouth curved into the ghost of a smirk. It will be. That night, Damien came home early. Aria was sitting on the sofa, laptop open but screen dark, her mind far from the email she'd been pretending to read. She looked up as the door opened, her expression neutral, unreadable. You're quiet, Damien said, dropping his keys on the counter. He studied her for a beat too long, his eyes narrowing just slightly. Busy, she said simply, closing the laptop. He crossed the room, his movements smooth, practiced. Busy, he repeated, his tone warm but laced with something sharp. He reached for her hand. You know I love you, right? Aria forced a small smile. Of course. But something in her tone must have betrayed her, because his hand stilled. His eyes lingered on her face, searching for answers she had no intention of giving. 3 days later, Julian's voice was on the phone. It's ready, he said. I'll bring it to you. Privacy matters. When he arrived, he didn't step past the threshold. He handed her a plain manila envelope, his expression unreadable. Read it, he said simply. Call me after. Aria locked the door behind him and stood in the quiet for a long time, the envelope heavy in her hands. Finally, she sat at the kitchen table and opened it. What she read made her vision blur. Credit cards, maxed out. All of them. Personal loans, 3. 2 in his name. 1 in hers, taken out 18 months ago, using forged signatures. Business loans, 2. Both in default. Interest compounding daily. Offshore account, a quiet siphon, funds funneled every month for the last 2 years. Her breath caught when she reached the final section. Other women. Serena Vale, 25. Engaged. Believes Damien is single. Believes they are building a future together. Lila Torres, 31. Met Damien 3 years ago. He drained her savings, disappeared without a trace. The words swam before her eyes. She forced herself to read them again. And again. Serena. Engaged. Her stomach clenched. The betrayal was sharp, but there was something colder beneath it. A calculation forming, a plan hardening in the silence. When Damien came home that evening, Arya was waiting. The report lay open on the table between them, the damning evidence spread out like shards of glass. How long? Her voice was quiet, steady, but her eyes were fire. Damien froze. What are you talking about? Don't, Arya snapped, the words slicing through the room. She rose slowly, her chair scraping the hardwood. How long have you been stealing from me? How long have you been building a life with her? She spat the name like poison, Serena. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, unbelievably, he laughed, a short, bitter sound that made her stomach turn. You think you know everything, he sneered, stepping forward, his mask slipping. But you don't. You've never understood the bigger picture. Everything I've done, everything, was for us. For us? Arya's voice cracked, sharp and incredulous. You forged my name, Damien. You drained accounts, you lied to my face, you paraded me in front of your parents while you built a future with someone else. And you did it for us? He took a step closer, anger flashing in his eyes. You play small, Arya. You think too small. I was building something bigger. For both of us. She stared at him, something inside her snapping clean. No, she said, her voice ice. You were building an escape plan. And you used me to do it. His jaw clenched. You'll regret this, he hissed, his tone low, dangerous. Arya didn't flinch. No, she said. The only thing I regret is not seeing you for what you are sooner. The door slammed when he left, the echo rattling through the house long after his car peeled down the street. Arya stood in the silence, her body trembling, not with fear, but with fury. She gathered the papers, stacked them neatly, and slid them back into the envelope. Her hands were steady now. By the time dawn broke, her plan was clear. The next morning, Marcus's voice came through the phone, calm and unyielding. We move now, she said before he could speak. Good, Marcus replied. Because this is only the beginning. We'll freeze what we can. Build the case. Arya, his voice softened, almost gentle, none of this is on you. You built something real. He's the one who made it a lie. Arya didn't respond immediately. She looked out the window, watched the rain beat against the glass, and let the quiet fill the space between them. Then, finally, she said, let's burn it down. Spring curled into summer and the Caldwell estate sent another envelope, heavy, cream, embossed. Dinner, estate planning, legacy and alignment. Inside was a single line handwritten by Eleanor, so proud to plan with you. The script was perfect, every letter like a fence picket. Arya RSVP'd yes because saying no would cost her more later. She put the card on the refrigerator under a magnet shaped like a lemon Maya had given her with a note, squeeze back. On the morning of the dinner, she ironed a black dress she could move in and took a photograph of the pre-approval letter she had rescued from the recycling after Damien fell asleep. She emailed the image to herself and to a folder with a name that sounded like nothing, receipts_WIP, because any folder you name evidence is a folder someone will ask to see. By the time the town car rolled under the portico and the butler opened the Caldwell door, Arya had persuaded herself of two true things that did not contradict: she loved her husband. And tonight she would need to love herself more. The chandelier hummed. The portraits watched. Somewhere, a quartet tuned. And at the end of the table, a leather folder waited with a pen resting on it like a snake sunning itself on a warm stone. Arya took her seat, smoothed her dress, and placed her phone face down beside the plate. She didn't need it. She had already saved what she needed to remember. The email had been polite but sharp, its words precise and restrained. Arya had rewritten it 3 times before hitting send. My name is Arya Bennett. You don't know me, but you should. I believe you are engaged to my husband, Damien Caldwell. I am not reaching out to hurt you. You deserve to know the truth before you take another step with him. If you are willing, I'd like to meet somewhere public, with someone you trust present. I will come with proof. She didn't expect a response so quickly, but less than 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Serena Vale. If this is some kind of game, you'll regret it. Serena Vale, Grey Finch Cafe. Tomorrow. Noon. I won't be alone. Arya stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Understood. I'll come with my attorney. I'm not here to fight. Only to show you what you deserve to see. Grey Finch Cafe smelled like roasted espresso and cinnamon, a comfort that clashed with the tension pressing through the air. Marcus sat beside Arya at the corner table by the window, his briefcase neatly positioned at his side. He'd insisted on being there, for protection and optics, he'd said, though Arya suspected he simply didn't want her walking into this moment alone. At exactly noon, a young woman walked in. Serena Vale. She was striking, but not in the curated, sharp-edged way of Eleanor Caldwell. Serena carried the kind of beauty that still felt young, untested. Her soft brown hair was pulled into a low ponytail, and her green eyes darted around the cafe until they landed on Arya. There was a second woman with her, early 30s, confident stance, eyes sharp. Probably the cousin she'd mentioned. Serena hesitated for a beat, then squared her shoulders and crossed the room. You're her, she said, voice low but edged. Arya stood, calm and deliberate. I'm Arya, she said softly. And yes, I'm his wife. The word wife hung in the air like an anvil. Serena blinked, the word seeming to hit her in waves. No, she whispered. He said, she stopped, her breath catching. Arya gestured toward the seat opposite her. Please. Sit. I brought proof. Marcus slid a folder across the table. These are public records, he said evenly. Filed loans. Property records. And, he flipped open another section, bank statements showing transfers from joint accounts. All tied to Damien Caldwell. And this, he slid over a printout, is your engagement announcement. Same ring he bought Arya 6 years ago, from the same jeweler. Different lie. Same man. Serena's hands trembled as she picked up the papers. Her cousin leaned closer, her sharp eyes scanning each line. He told me, Serena's voice cracked. He told me the divorce was almost final. That she jerked her chin toward Arya, was clinging, making things hard. Arya kept her tone calm, gentle even. That's his pattern. You're not the first. And unless we stop him, you won't be the last. Serena's cousin leaned back, her expression hard. You said proof. This is proof. She turned to Serena. You need to walk away. Now. Serena looked down at her trembling hands, then back at Arya. Why are you doing this? Why warn me? Because you don't deserve this, Arya said simply. And because I'm done letting him destroy people and walk away clean. For a long moment, Serena just stared at her, the war of disbelief and dawning clarity flickering across her face. Then she nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Over the next hour, the two women sat in that cafe, piecing together a timeline Damien had never wanted revealed. Serena showed screenshots of messages, emails where Damien had promised trips to Europe, access to the inheritance, and a future built on lies. Marcus took notes methodically, building a chain of evidence with every word. This isn't just about infidelity, Marcus said when the table was littered with papers and empty coffee cups. This is fraud. Bigamy. Financial crimes that carry real weight. If we go in prepared, we can expose him and protect both of you from further damage. Serena's cousin folded her arms. And his parents? Aria's jaw tightened. They're part of it. They've been circling my assets for months. That inheritance they've been dangling in front of him. They need him married to someone, anyone, to secure it. I was supposed to be the obedient wife who handed everything over quietly. When I refused, he found someone else to play the role. Serena let out a sharp, bitter laugh. And I bought every word. You believed a man who made it easy to believe, Aria said. That's not on you. But now you know. And now we take that knowledge and burn their game to the ground. Marcus outlined it with surgical precision. 1. Freeze accounts, every joint account, every line of credit. Stop the siphoning cold. 2. File civil claims, fraud, forgery, and financial abuse. Public, documented, undeniable. 3. Prepare criminal complaints. Unauthorized loans and forged signatures meant the police and regulators would be involved. 4. Public confrontation, the next family dinner at the Caldwell estate. Serena would attend, as planned. Aria would be there too, with Marcus, with evidence, with the truth laid out like a bomb waiting to detonate. Serena hesitated. That's public, she said softly. Aria met her gaze. Yes. And it has to be. They've built their power on silence. On making sure no one ever connects the dots. This time, we control the room. Serena glanced at her cousin, who gave a single sharp nod. Then we do it, Serena said, her voice trembling but certain. That night, back at the townhouse, Aria moved through the rooms like a woman preparing for war. She pulled files from the safe, printed documents, and stacked them into neat, labeled folders. Fraud, loans and signatures. Bank transfers, evidence. Offshore accounts, proof. Engagement, duplicate rings. Each folder went into the black case that had become her shield. Maya stopped by with takeout, dropping a bag of noodles on the counter. You ready for this? She asked, eyes sharp but warm. Aria glanced at the growing stack of evidence and then at her friend. I've never been more ready, she said quietly. 2 days later, the inevitable came. A call from Eleanor, her voice sweet and sharp all at once. Aria, darling, she purred. Family dinner this weekend. 7 o'clock. It's time we all realign. Aria smiled, though Eleanor couldn't see it. Of course, Eleanor, she said smoothly. Wouldn't miss it for the world. When she hung up, she exhaled slowly, the plan settling over her like armor. Because this time, she wasn't walking into their house alone. And this time, the Caldwells had no idea that the quiet, polite wife they thought they'd broken was about to burn their empire down. The Caldwell estate gleamed like a palace against the night, its towering windows spilling golden light across the gravel drive. Inside the car, Aria sat in silence, her black case on the seat beside her, her fingers resting on the handle like a soldier cradling a weapon. Marcus sat across from her, his usual calm now sharpened into something surgical. This ends tonight, he said evenly, watching her face. You don't flinch. You don't explain. You deliver, and then you walk away. Aria's eyes stayed on the winding driveway ahead. I'm not here to flinch, she murmured. The car rolled to a stop beneath the stone portico. The driver stepped out, but Aria didn't move immediately. She drew a slow breath, feeling the weight of the night settle over her shoulders like armor. Then she stepped out, heels clicking against the smooth stone, every movement deliberate, every line of her posture controlled. The dining room was a theater of wealth. Crystal chandeliers glowed above a long mahogany table, gold-trimmed china perfectly aligned, candles flickering like nervous witnesses. Eleanor stood near the head of the table, her smile polished, her champagne flute steady in her hand. Charles loomed near the fireplace, arms folded, gaze sharp and cold. And Damien looked tense, his easy charm stretched thin as he paced near the far end of the table. When Arya stepped into the room, conversation died. Eleanor's eyes flicked to her, sharp and calculating. "Arya," Eleanor said, voice dripping honey. "How surprising." Arya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Marcus walked in behind her, his leather briefcase in hand, his calm confidence filling the room like a second presence. And then Serena appeared in the doorway. She looked pale but steady, her cousin by her side, their hands linked like anchors. The room shifted. Damien froze, his face draining of color. "Babe," he stammered, moving towards Serena, "what are you doing here?" Serena didn't answer. She crossed the room, shoulders squared, and stopped beside Arya. Marcus set his briefcase on the table and clicked it open with precise, deliberate movements. "Good evening," he said, his tone calm but sharp. "We're here to discuss some pressing matters." Charles straightened. "This is a private family dinner." "Not anymore," Marcus said coolly. He pulled out a folder and laid it flat on the table, flipping it open to reveal crisp documents. "What we have here," he continued, "are multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and forgery. All tied to Damien Caldwell." Eleanor laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. "This is ridiculous." Marcus ignored her, sliding the first document toward Charles. "This," he said, "is a business loan application in your daughter-in-law's name. Forged. Here," he flipped to another page, "are bank transfers, joint funds moved to an offshore account without authorization. And here," he turned another page, "are wire transfers from that same account to cover debts in your son's name." Damien's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists. "This isn't what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," Arya said, her voice sharp and steady. "You built your empire on lies, Damien. Lies you told me. Lies you told her." She nodded toward Serena. "Lies you told everyone in this room." Serena's cousin stepped forward, her voice sharp. "And bigamy," she said. "You proposed to her while still married to Arya. You told her you were divorcing, told her the paperwork was done." Gasps rippled around the room. Eleanor's face twisted, her flawless mask cracking. "This is absurd," Eleanor snapped, but her voice wavered. "Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're saying?" "Yes," Serena said, her voice trembling but loud enough to cut through the room. "I believed every lie he told me. About the inheritance. About the life we were building. And now." She swallowed hard, tears glinting in her eyes. "Now I know what he is." Damien turned toward her, desperation creeping into his tone. "Serena, listen to me." "No," she snapped, her voice breaking. "You don't get to talk. Not to me. Not anymore." Marcus closed the folder with a soft, decisive snap. "Complaints have already been filed," he said. "Fraud. Forgery. Identity theft. Bigamy. Every document, every transaction, every message is already in the hands of the authorities. And every bank you defrauded has been notified. Your accounts are frozen. Your assets are flagged. The clock is ticking." Eleanor's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. She didn't even flinch. "You went to the police?" she whispered, her voice hollow. "Yes," Arya said simply. "And to the banks. And to the regulators. Every door you tried to keep closed. Wide open." Charles stepped forward, his face darkening. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Arya turned her gaze on him, unflinching. "I've done what you never thought I would," she said. "I protected myself. From him. From you. From all of you." Damien's voice rose, sharp and venomous. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started." "No, Damien," Arya said, her voice cutting through his. You have no idea what you've lost. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Then Marcus spoke again, his tone calm but lethal. We'll be leaving now. Investigators will contact you directly. And I suggest you speak to your attorneys, quickly. He closed his briefcase with a soft click, and the sound was louder than any shouting could have been. Serena turned without a word, her cousin steadying her as they walked toward the door. Marcus followed, pausing only to give Arya a small nod. Arya lingered for one final moment, her gaze sweeping the room, the broken glass, Eleanor's pale face, Charles's clenched jaw, Damien's hollow stare. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. You underestimated me, she said. You thought I'd stay quiet. That I'd let you take everything I built and smile while you did it. You were wrong. Then she turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, each step a declaration. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within days, headlines screamed of scandal, prominent Caldwell family under investigation for fraud and bigamy. Damien's accounts were frozen, his credit shredded. The banks closed in first, then the regulators, then the prosecutors. Charles's carefully curated reputation cracked under the weight of subpoenas and public scrutiny. Eleanor vanished from public life entirely, her once commanding presence reduced to a shadow. Arya didn't watch the coverage. She didn't need to. Marcus sent her updates only when necessary, quiet summaries of progress, each one another brick in the wall she'd built to keep them out of her life for good. Weeks later, Arya moved into a small loft overlooking the river. It wasn't grand. It wasn't opulent. But it was hers. Every inch, every corner, every quiet moment was hers. On her first night there, she poured a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the water catch the glow of the city lights. The silence was different now, not heavy, not suffocating. It was peaceful. She thought of Serena sometimes, of the quiet strength in her eyes when they'd walked out of that house together. They exchanged messages occasionally, small check-ins, the beginning of a strange but genuine friendship forged in betrayal and rebuilt in survival. And when Arya looked at her reflection in the glass, she didn't see the woman they'd tried to break. She saw the woman who had burned their empire to the ground and walked away without a single regret. When trust breaks, freedom begins. What part of Arya's journey hit you the hardest? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience and redemption.